Hey everyone, welcome to the second installment of my Hollow Knight lore series. Recently, we examined the Soul Sanctum and the group of scholars related to it. Today, we're going to do another very interesting lore video that I hope you all enjoy. This will be mainly canon with as little lore speculation as possible. Alright, now it's time for our topic. Weavers. Today we'll be covering the Weaver civilization from Deep Nest and uncover all that we can about them. These fascinating creatures are likely going to have a lot of light shown on them in the upcoming game Hollow Knight Silksong. But until then, we're stuck with what we got, so without further ado, let's start this video and do the lore of the Weavers. Okay, so let's start with some of the backstory about the Weaver tribe. Based on some info and art we have, we'll be making just a couple speculations here. Weavers are a spider-like creature who immigrated from a faraway kingdom. With the appearance of many weaver-like objects and what appears to be the mask of a weaver in the trailer for Silksong, we can say with pretty much 100% certainty that these bugs came from the kingdom of Farloom, which is the location for the upcoming game Hollow Knight Silksong. A long time before the events of Hollow Knight and the actions of your knight, the Weavers came to Hollow Nest, and they settled into the biome of Deep Nest with many of the other creepy beasts and spider-type creatures that were similar to them. Quickly, they wove their way into the culture and lifestyle of Deep Nest. Sorry about the pun, I had to. And they quickly became part of the Kingdom of the Deep, which is just how I'm really coolly gonna say the Deep Nest Kingdom. Similar to some of the other creatures in Deep Nest, these creatures were highly intelligent. They built up a lot of highly innovative and fancy architecture, which we can see in the game, and this was far less crude than that of the Beast's Den. They had their own styles of art and construction, which we'll get to later, that involved the usage of silk, a substance that these weavers made and wove. They earned the respect of all the bugs in Deep Nest and became a crucial part of the Deep Nest culture. The other bugs and beasts of Deep Nest started to make statues and other things in the likeness of the Weavers, and this kind of became a sort of symbol for Deep Nest. These Weavers were so much trusted by the beasts that they were entrusted, likely by Hera herself, to raise and train Hornet to her prime form. She, like the Weavers, uses silk to help her perform certain actions, but Hornet uses this in a much more combat-oriented way, while the Weavers used it for more construction-type things. We see Hornet doing this in the Hornet 2 fight, where she uses it for the hanging spiky balls, and then for the grappling hook at the end of the fight. The charm Weaver Song was also most likely left for her in the event that she would have revisited her childhood home, but since the charm is still there, it's likely she never went back. We'll speak about this charm a bit later. Now, since the backstory is done, we're going to move on to talk about some of the more important aspects of the Weavers, their craft, and the contributions to the Kingdom of Hollow Nest. The Weavers are amazing at weaving, as you'd suspect, given the name. They use a material called silk, which is possibly and probably a magical substance, similar to Soul and Void. In the Silksong trailer, we see Hornet using the silk to bind, which is Silksong's version of healing, using the silk she gathered to repair her shell and gain 3 extra masks of health. The silk is seen in lots of places throughout Hollow Nest, including the White Palace, so that's a bit of a background on silk. The midwife NPC says about the charm, "Oh, hee, been prying about the Weaver's home, have you, my dear? Quite brazen to pilfer that special charm. Amazing things the Weavers once crafted on their looms. Stories, shields, spells. So much of our history is spun upon their spools. Your little friends there are testaments to their talents, hee," and proceeds to try and eat you. Like we mentioned earlier, this charm was woven by the Weavers using silk and using song, where she says that they wove the stories on their loom. It's via this song that they can do this. And so they can create magical objects that can protect the wearers, such as the Weaver Song charm. This plays into a later point about how the Weavers can make magical items. Next, we'll talk about some of the parchment that they made. Lem talks about this a lot. It's less important than some of their other contributions, but it is still important for the history of Hallownest and civilians, as it allowed them to keep track of thoughts and stuff. So, like Relic Seeker Lem says, this journal is of a traditional stone type. Text endures well upon it. In its declining age, the city switched from stone to parchment woven of spider silk. This statement doesn't necessarily say that it's made of spider silk that was woven by the weavers, but since they're so prominent spiders and it has the word weave in it, we can just pretty much assume that these probably were woven by the weavers. Now, it's time for the coolest part about the weavers. We're going to talk about the seal of binding that is found in the Weaver's Den and the implications of that to this game's lore. Alright, like I just mentioned, there's the strange seal of binding placed in the Weaver's Den, and for quite a while people referred to it as the Hornet Room because the head on the seal of binding looked kind of like Hornet's head. But then, a couple weeks later, with a clear mind, people realized that this was actually the face of the Hollow Knight, or the Pure Vessel. The seal is pretty clearly made of the magical weaver silk that is used by the weavers, and points towards a connection between the Pale King's plot to stop the Radiance and the weavers. Furthermore, we see many large spools of silk in some strange, unexpected places throughout Hallownest. These spools are in stag stations that the old stag hadn't used before, being the distant village stag station and the hidden station. These seem like some very odd spots in Hallownest for these spools to be kept, until you really think. These locations would make a lot of sense given that the weavers and the Pale King were trading. The spools would be placed in the distant village station and then transported to the hidden station to be brought to the White Palace. I know that some of you may say, oh, but the last stag has never been to these stations, though. My response to that would be, we know that there were other stags back in the time who weren't dead, and the Pale King probably entrusted this task to his best and eldest stag. This silk trade could have been part of the dalliance that the Pale King made with Hera. Now we'll talk about what the Pale King did with this silk. We see spools of silk in the White Palace in the room dubbed the King's Laboratory. Since we see that the weavers had worked with the silk to create a seal of binding in their den, seems like the king used these for his own seals on his mold, on his King's Mold and Wings Mold creations. We see something similar to a seal on his molds for the King's Mold, and if the weavers sung their magic into the thread and made the silk with the command to serve, this seal would be how the king regulated the behavior and commanded the King's Mold. The next part was probably an even bigger secret than the last. He created some extra special seals to block off certain things in Hallownest, from protecting himself in the White Palace, sealing the secret memory being the Path of Pain, and how he protected the Hollow Knight via the Dreamer seals. This still leaves the question of the weird trilobite in the Beast Den, which is also protected by a seal of bindings. And I have a decent answer for that, which would make some sense canonically. I believe this trilobite could be the body and or the grave of the King of Deepnest, who is Hera's husband. When he died, Hera, who is a common bug, wanted a child of elevated status, which was her end of the bargain for the dalliance between her and the Pale King. So this could have also been part of the bargain on the Pale King's side. We will give you guys a seal of binding which you can use to protect the body from being defiled, and that will be another part you get from the dalliance. Okay, thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope you learned a lot about the Weaver tribe and their place in the history of Hallownest. If you haven't subscribed, please do so and share it with your friends so that people can maybe learn a bit more about one of the greatest games ever. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Ravenbane. Have a nice day.